We differentiate ourselves from our competitors through compliance. It's one of our USPs. And some might say, well, why? Why bother? You know, Luke can do this activity on his own. Perhaps to some extent he's still going to continue to do that. But that's not the attitude that we take. You know, Rick mentioned our mission this morning, and that is to be the most trusted business network. And with that, compliance probably is the #1 factor. And whether that be VAT compliance or also the inherent compliance and risks that come with an automated or digitized process.
One of the main challenges is, of course, that we have compliance fragmentation. So I will just do a quick walk around the different areas, the regions of the world, and see what is the status today when it comes to e-invoicing, other market intervention regulations. What trends do we see and what developments do we have? And I'm going to divide the world into, or the countries in the world, into one of 4 categories. Either it's a so-called post-audit country, where, like the EU, where you must issue an invoice, but where the audit can happen anytime during the storage period. The second category is the clearance countries, which is a country whereby the tax authority is involved in every invoice transaction. So all transactions tax authorities have total control over, like Latin America. Thirdly, we have countries with no VAT. There might be a sales tax. Often e-invoicing is permitted, but perhaps not specifically regulated. And finally, we have countries that do not today permit e-invoicing, so paper invoicing countries. Generally, if we look at the world, there is a slight trend towards clearance countries where the tax authority have this full control over each and every invoice. But more importantly, we see a strong tendency that the clearance countries put in place mandatory e-invoicing. And by doing that, of course, they get very good control over the VAT revenue and also other areas, like the market intervention areas.
Just wanted to ask you...
Can I just say e-reporting, e-accounting, or e-procurement in Chile?
If we are asking our suppliers to send us our invoices using this mechanism, we are effectively directing the form and content of our suppliers' invoices. And that's direct opposition to the way we normally react. You know, it's the supplier's responsibility to provide a correct invoice, it's the supplier's responsibility to have the correct liability. And if we're directing that, it's not light touch. We have to take a very, very clear view of it. So it very quickly became apparent that you have to break down the problem. You have to go to your local teams and your local tax managers and finance managers. And it's quite interesting when you go over to other teams and say, we want you to sign off on this process. Suddenly they get really interested in how it works. And that was actually a great opportunity, because it was a great opportunity for education and a great opportunity for collaboration. And the other thing that comes out of it is you tend to find that finance managers and tax specialists within a business end up taking on the personality of the fiscal authorities they deal with, and that affects how they do it. So we went to the different teams. Some were a bit more relaxed than others, but we took the view that it wasn't going to get rolled out unless everybody was comfortable with it. That means everybody had to understand how it worked. And that brought out a couple of questions, which goes back to the points you were making earlier on, Christoph. It's not just about adhering to the local compliance rules, the local invoicing rules. And so you draw up a plan on how to do it on a country-by-country basis, and that's the only way you can really solve it. It's breaking into chunks, solving them individually one by one. And until you get the absolute comfort of the teams you're working towards, you can't really proceed. It's about innovation. It's about bringing together ideas, and it's about collaboration. And so Lucy probably had more than enough emails going out. How does this work? What does this mean? And it's about working together to solve the problem.
Put things also into perspective from my angle. Invoice compliance is about more than what you could call pure invoice compliance. And And with that I mean is that there's a strict thing around invoice compliance, which has got to do about invoice content requirements, authenticity, integrity, etc. So that is what I would call the strict invoice compliance. Next to that, beyond what is the pure legal requirements, there will be elements on an invoice which will lead to invoice reporting, and that is processing, which is more and more done in an automated manner. So there will be elements on an invoice, also on the PO, so around the process, that will feed into a tax determination. So compliance will also be impacted there, not on the pure invoice compliance per se level, but also will feed into your compliant books or your books being compliant. So that's an element to take into account. There's archiving of invoices, so that's invoice archive compliance. There's countries imposing rules around you need to certify your archiving software, you need to archive here and there. You have all these countries with different archive duration terms, so all that is also different on a country by country basis.
Compliance is a moving target. It's constantly shifting. People are changing rules, interpretations of rules, derogations within the EU. And once you appreciate that and you've always got an eye on it, you've always got an eye on where it's going to go and how it's going to go and how it affects you. And having that dialogue with a mindset to problem solve, essentially, has been absolutely fundamental to working through and implementing the process.